He thought it was just a joke. A can tossed, a phone raised, a soldier mocked. But what that entitled teenager didn't know was that the man standing guard wasn't just any veteran, and the silence he broke would awaken something far more powerful than punishment: honor, forgiveness, and a voice long lost to grief. What happened next changed 3 families and a nation forever. The midday sun blazed over Arlington National Cemetery, casting long, solemn shadows across rows of white headstones. The air was quiet, too quiet for a weekend. Tourists stood in hushed clusters, the gravel crunching beneath their shoes as they made their way to the tomb of the unknown soldier. Cameras were lowered, voices softened. Even children who moments earlier had been laughing now fell silent, except for one: Brady Simmons. 14, lean, spoiled, and painfully unaware of the moment he was about to ruin. Wearing a red hoodie with earbuds hanging loose, Brady leaned over the stone barrier, phone in hand. His designer sneakers scraped against the granite as he climbed onto the lower ledge, pointing his camera at the tomb guard, pacing with robotic precision. He smirked at his phone's screen. "Yo, check this out, this dude's like a statue or whatever. Watch this, I'm gonna break him," Brady whispered to his phone, broadcasting live to his TikTok followers. Across the plaza, Elliot Simmons, tech billionaire, Silicon Valley power player, and Brady's father stood beside his impeccably dressed wife. Becca clearly annoyed. Becca hissed. "Get down. This isn't a game." "He's fine," Elliot muttered without looking up from his smartwatch. "Let the kid explore." Brady took that as approval. With a chuckle, he pulled a crushed soda can from his hoodie pocket, still sticky from lunch, and lobbed it high into the air. It landed with a hollow clink just feet from the tomb guard's path. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Someone dropped their phone. Another whispered, "Is this kid insane?" But the tomb guard did not flinch. He marched forward one deliberate step at a time. His face was stone, his jaw etched with discipline. The rifle at his side gleamed in the sun. His dark green military jacket, perfectly creased, bore no medals. His eyes locked straight ahead, burned with a quiet intensity. Ben Stone was not like the others. He wasn't here for the paycheck or the protocol. He was here for something deeper, something sacred. Brady, emboldened by the silence, shouted, "Hey, robot, you're not gonna say anything. Are you even human?" Then click. Brady pressed record again, moving closer, holding the phone up inches from the soldier's face. That was when Ben stopped. The crowd froze. For the first time in over an hour, Ben broke the mechanical rhythm. He turned his head slowly and met the boy's eyes. Not with anger, not with scorn, but with the chilling, measured calm of a man who had seen war, death, sacrifice, and worse, silence. The moment stretched. Brady chuckled nervously. "What you gonna do now, old man?" "Say cheese." Ben's hand moved fast, controlled and practiced. He reached forward, plucked the phone from Brady's grasp, and in one smooth motion hurled it to the ground. It shattered against the stone. The crack of the glass echoed through the plaza like a rifle shot. Silence. Then, someone clapped. Not mockingly, but slow, deliberate. From the edge of the crowd, an elderly veteran stood tall, removing his cap in respect. Others followed, heads bowed. Brady took a step back. "Hey, he assaulted me. Did you see that? He broke my phone, that's like illegal." His voice trembled, not with fear, but with something more foreign to him. Shame. Becca's hand flew to her mouth. "Oh no." Elliot finally looked up. What the hell just happened? Then came the sound no one expected. Not sirens, not shouting. The low hum of the internet. A woman nearby had captured everything. Her phone still recording, she whispered. He had it coming. She uploaded it in real time, tagging it. Entitled Kid versus Dinard Tomb Guard. Honor. Still lives within minutes, the moment went viral. Brady tried to explain, but no one was listening. Because at that moment, all eyes turned back to Ben Stone, who resumed his post, unshaken expression unreadable. But inside his heart was a battlefield. He hadn't broken protocol in years. Not since his brother's remains had been interred here. Not since he took the vow to serve the fallen with silent dignity. Every step he took was for the men and women who never came home, and for the one soldier he could never forget. He didn't look at Brady again. He didn't need to, because something had cracked, and it wasn't just the screen of a phone. It was the illusion that privilege protected disrespect, that wealth excused ignorance, that honor could be mocked without consequence. And as the world would soon find out, the consequences were only just beginning. When Ben Stone removed his boots that night, the soles of his socks were soaked with sweat and silence. He sat alone at the edge of the twin bed in his small government-issued apartment near Fort Myer. The overhead light hummed quietly, casting a yellowish glow over the folded blanket at the foot of the bed, the perfectly lined-up pair of polished shoes, and a single photograph on the nightstand. In the photo, 3 people smiled: a much younger Ben, his older brother Samuel, and a woman with gentle eyes, holding a little girl wrapped in a white baby blanket. Ben picked up the frame and ran his thumb across her face. "Hey, Mel," he whispered. "Long day." His voice cracked, not from exhaustion, but from memory. She had died far from here, in a place no one back home even talked about anymore. Syria. The headlines had faded within days. A bombing at a rural hospital. She was an aid worker. Wrong place, wrong time, they told him. As if those words could undo the crater in his life. But even that tragedy wasn't the first. Samuel, his older brother, his best friend, the man who taught him how to throw a spiral and how to salute, was buried just 30 steps from the tomb of the unknown soldier. Killed in Kunar province during a nighttime raid. The body came back zipped in a flag-draped box, but a piece of Ben had never returned. It was why he marched here now. Every step, every turn, every second of silence was for them. In the next room, Emma lay curled up in her pajamas, hugging a small brown bear that had long lost one eye. She was 8 now, hadn't spoken in nearly 2 years, not since the day a uniformed officer knocked on their door in the middle of a snowstorm. Ben had hoped she was too young to understand, but children always knew. She never screamed, never cried, just went quiet. She still smiled sometimes, drew in her sketchbook, left little notes on the table that said, "Thank you," or "Good job, Daddy." But her voice, it had packed its bags and disappeared into some quiet corner of her heart. He never pushed her. He had learned some battles are won by waiting, not fighting. That night, as he tucked her in, he noticed something new. A piece of paper folded under her pillow. She pulled it out and handed it to him. It was a drawing, a man in a green jacket holding a flag, standing straight beside a white grave. Below it, in her careful childlike writing, "For Mommy and Uncle Sam. Daddy stands so they can rest." Ben's throat tightened. He looked down at her. Her big eyes blinked up at him with quiet knowing. He kissed her forehead, lingering a second longer than usual. "Good night, little star," he whispered. She didn't answer. She just slid the bear under her chin and smiled. The next morning, headlines had exploded. Tomb Guard confronts, entitled "Teen Sparks Nationwide Debate." Marine veteran breaks. Silence at Arlington goes viral. The face of respect, who is the man behind the uniform. Ben ignored them all. The base phone rang 3 times before he picked it up. It was Colonel Sophia Bennett, his direct commanding officer at Arlington. A woman of iron posture and 0 tolerance for stupidity. "I need you in my office at 1600, she said. Voice clipped. "Understood. And bring your composure. There's a firestorm coming." Click. He sighed and reached for his uniform. Colonel Bennett's office was lined with black and white photos of fallen soldiers and a single large frame holding a worn American flag that had once flown over Iwo Jima. Sophia stood by the window, arms crossed. "You made quite the impression, Sergeant Stone," former Sergeant Ben corrected softly. "Now just a tomb guard." "You're always more than that," she said, turning to face him. "But right now you're a walking PR crisis. You broke a phone. And protocol." Ben didn't flinch. "Yes, ma'am." "Good," she said, sitting. "Because I'm not here to scold you. I'm here to brace for the circus." She slid a file across the table. "Elliot Simmons, CEO of Riverton Tech, worth $9 billion, the boy's father." Ben opened the file. News clippings, photos, social media comments. One stood out. The guard was a thug. Fire him. Sue him. Make him pay. "His team is threatening litigation," Sophia said, claiming physical assault and emotional distress. But she leaned in. "I've watched the footage from 6 different angles. What you did wasn't violence. It was discipline. Controlled. Precise. And frankly, overdue." Ben blinked. Sophia leaned back. "Now here's the catch. There's talk of bringing this to federal court. But I've got a proposition that might settle this quietly." Ben raised an eyebrow. "I'm listening." But she only smiled and tapped the file. "All in due time. For now, I need you to hold that head high. The public's behind you. But that boy..." She shook her head. "He's about to learn what honor truly means." Ben stood, saluted. "Thank you, ma'am." As he turned to leave, Sophia called out Ben. He looked back. "You're not just guarding the unknown. You're reminding the living what still matters." He nodded once. Outside, the flag fluttered softly in the breeze. That afternoon, as the sun dipped low over Arlington's white hills, Ben returned to his post. He adjusted his gloves, lifted his rifle, took his position with mechanical precision. But inside, something had shifted. The lines were no longer just painted on stone. They were now etched across the conscience of a nation. And someone had just crossed one. The video hit 1 million views in under 4 hours. It started with a 30-second clip posted by a tourist named Carol Henderson, a retired nurse visiting Arlington with her granddaughter. She hadn't meant to become a whistleblower. She just wanted to document her trip and maybe go viral with something wholesome. Instead, she caught lightning in a bottle. In the video, Brady Simmons, smirking with the confidence only generational wealth could bestow, leaned into the face of a stoic tomb guard. He insulted, he mocked, he recorded. Then the moment crack. The phone shattered. But not just the phone. The illusion of untouchability. Entitled Kid trended within the hour. But so did something else. Tomb guard. Truth. Ben Stone. Honor. Has a name. Some praised the guard for defending the sacred. Others cried abuse of power. Talk show hosts weighed in. Military veterans rallied online. A senator reposted the video with the caption, "This man doesn't need to be disciplined. He needs to be decorated." But inside the Simmons home, tucked behind a marble gate in the suburbs of Georgetown, the reaction was different. Elliot Simmons stood in front of a massive flat screen, fists clenched. "This is libel, defamation, character assassination." He turned to his assistant who had flown in from Palo Alto that morning. "Tell PR to start spinning. He's a violent thug who broke a miner's property. We'll make it a civil rights issue." Becca sat on the edge of a leather chair, hands clasped in her lap, eyes fixed on the paused frame of the guard's face, stone still unreadable. But Elliot. People love him. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "Exactly," Elliot snapped. "Which means they'll burn our son in the comments. You see these death threats. Memes. Someone made a remix of Brady's scream with 'God Bless America' playing in the background." He turned to his son. Brady sat on the couch, hunched pale thumbs, nervously tapping the sides of a replacement phone. "They're calling me a disgrace," Brady muttered. "You're not," Elliot barked. "You're a victim. Don't forget that." Brady looked up, eyes hollow. "But I kinda did throw the can." Elliot's face hardened. "You were provoked. That's the story." "Understand." Becca opened her mouth to speak, but closed it again. The truth was settling in her chest like a cold stone. Something had gone terribly wrong, and it wasn't just about a broken phone. It was about the kind of son they had raised, and the man who had stood against him. Back at the cemetery, Ben Stone ignored the noise. He moved as he always did, 21 steps, click of the heel turn, rifle at his side, eyes forward. It didn't matter if 1,000,000 people watched. He wasn't performing. He was remembering. He was serving. The only concession he made to the chaos was turning off his flip phone and letting it sit untouched on the kitchen counter next to Emma's crayons and peanut butter crackers. He hadn't told her what happened, but children feel ripples. They hear more in silence than adults ever speak aloud. That evening, Emma placed a single sheet of paper on the dinner table. It was a drawing. On one side, a man in green with a broken phone at his feet. On the other, a small girl holding a flower. Between them, a red line shattered like lightning. Ben stared at it for a long time, then folded it gently and tucked it into the inside pocket of his jacket. The next morning, an unmarked car pulled up outside Ben's residence. Colonel Sophia Bennett stepped out dressed in civilian clothes, but walking like she still wore command on her shoulders. Ben met her at the door. "No press," she said, handing him a thick envelope. "What is it, a subpoena? Simmons is filing." Ben exhaled slowly. "Of course he is." But that's not all, Sophia added. "The Arlington Advisory Board just called an emergency session. The question isn't whether what you did was right. It's whether it was appropriate." Ben finished for her. "Exactly." Ben nodded. "I'll show up. Say what needs saying." Sophia looked at him carefully. "You're not just standing for yourself now, Ben. You're standing for something bigger. They'll try to turn this into politics, a PR war, public perception. But you need to be steady." He glanced down at Emma, who had come to stand beside him barefoot, holding a cup of juice with both hands. "I'll stand," he said softly, "like I always do." Later that day, as the sun began to fall and the sky took on the soft blue of approaching twilight, a press conference began outside the Simmons estate. Elliot stepped up to the podium in a crisp navy blazer, flanked by lawyers and PR agents. "My son was publicly humiliated," he began. "The man involved acted without restraint, and we are pursuing all legal options." Reporters shouted questions. Cameras flashed. A few feet behind him, Brady stood, frozen eyes darting nervously. He looked at the sea of microphones. He remembered the crack, the weight of the guard's stare, the cheers that followed. He swallowed hard. Becca watched from the side, arms crossed, not saying a word. But in her eyes was the glint of something unspoken doubt, maybe, or the first flicker of regret. Meanwhile, in a quiet room at Fort Myer, Ben unfolded Emma's drawing again and placed it gently beside his brother's folded flag. He didn't care about lawsuits or talking heads. He cared about what came next. Because when a crack runs through stone, it doesn't always mean collapse. Sometimes it just means something old is breaking open to make room for something new. And Ben had a feeling the battle ahead wouldn't be fought with rifles or words, but with presence, with discipline, and maybe with forgiveness. The room was supposed to be off limits to media, but nothing could stop the whispers from leaking out. Inside a somber, marble-floored conference hall tucked behind the Arlington Visitors Center, a special session of the Arlington Advisory Board had convened in haste. Security stood at every corner. A thin fog of tension hung over the room, fueled by flashing headlines and high-stakes egos. Ben Stone sat quietly on the left side of the polished oak table, uniform pressed, chin lifted, eyes unwavering. Not defiant, just calm like a man who knew the difference between noise and truth. Across from him sat Elliot Simmons' designer suit, sharp enough to slice air, flanked by 2 lawyers and a PR specialist whispering into his ear every few seconds. Beside them sat Brady, shoulders hunched, hoodie sleeves pulled over his palms, like he wanted to disappear inside the fabric. Becca was there too, hands folded tightly. Lips pressed, her gaze occasionally drifting toward Ben with something like confusion. The chairwoman cleared her throat. "We are here today to determine whether Sergeant Benjamin Stone acted outside the bounds of protocol during the altercation that occurred at the tomb of the unknown soldier. While military conduct standards are clear, the public response has been unprecedented." A murmur of agreement passed through the board. Elliot leaned forward. "My son was humiliated in front of hundreds of people and millions more online. His phone was destroyed. He has received threats. And yet this man," he gestured at Ben with a sharp jerk of his chin, "hasn't offered so much as an apology." Ben didn't blink. "Mr. Simmons," the chairwoman said calmly, "your son threw an object at a sacred site." Elliot raised an eyebrow. "A soda can. To some, that can might as well have been a grenade." The silence that followed was cold and long. Then heels clicked on tile. All heads turned as Colonel Sophia Bennett entered the room, shoulders squared, like she could carry the entire Marine Corps on her back. Without a word, she strode to the front of the room and addressed the panel directly. "With respect, I need the floor." The chairwoman nodded. "Colonel Bennett, please proceed." Sophia turned her eyes to Brady, then to Elliot, and finally to Ben. Her voice was cool but carried like thunder. "America has sent its sons and daughters to foreign soil for centuries. Some never returned. Some came back in pieces. And some, like Sergeant Stone, chose to stand here in silence, in sweat, in sorrow, to honor the ones who didn't make it home." She paused. What happened 2 days ago was not a moment of misunderstanding or youthful rebellion. It was an act of disrespect, clear, loud, and inexcusable. And Sergeant Stone did exactly what we train our tomb guards to do. He did not lash out. He did not break formation until provoked beyond protocol. Elliot interrupted. "He destroyed private property." Sophia turned to him sharply. "And your son desecrated sacred ground." Her words slapped the room still. She turned back to the board. "We're not here because a phone was broken. We're here because something far more fragile was cracked, our national conscience." She stepped closer to Brady now. "Young man, I won't speak to you as a colonel now, but as an American. You were given every advantage. Private education, a stable home, wealth. And yet somewhere along the way you missed the lesson of humility." Brady looked down, blinking fast. "Ben Stone has stood guard through snow, through fire drills, through bomb threats. He buried his brother under the same white stones you mocked. And still he came back to honor this place. Day after day. Not for likes, not for headlines, but because he believes that the dead deserve dignity." Sophia faced the panel again. "If we punish this man today, we're telling every soldier out there that silence in service means nothing. That decorum can be overridden by wealth, and that breaking a phone is worse than breaking a legacy." Silence. Even Elliot said nothing. Sophia stepped back. "I recommend no disciplinary action. None. Let the story stand as it happened. Let the people decide what kind of country we are." A quiet round of nods rippled through the board, but the final blow didn't come from the boardroom. It came from outside. As the session adjourned, the families exited into a courtyard now filled with cameras and reporters. The news had broken. There was no stopping the tide now. Flashes exploded. "Sergeant Stone, Do you regret your actions, Mr. Simmons? Will you sue Brady? Do you have anything to say to the American people?" In the center of the chaos, Ben stood still, Emma's hand wrapped in his. She had been brought by a fellow guard after school, quiet, as always, sketchbook in hand. But this time she looked up at her father, not just with comfort, but pride. And for the first time, the world saw him not just as a soldier, but as a father. Elliot grabbed Brady's shoulder. "Don't say a word." But the boy shrugged him off. He walked slowly toward Ben. The crowd parted. Cameras zoomed in. Reporters leaned forward. Brady's face was pale. He began, voice cracking. "I didn't get it before. I thought you were just a statue, like a background piece." Ben said nothing. Brady swallowed. "But now I know you were standing for someone." Ben's voice was soft, but firm. "I stand for everyone." A single tear slid down the boy's cheek. Then he turned around and walked back to his parents, leaving Elliot stunned and Becca wiping at the corner of her eye. That night, across news broadcasts and viral clips, Colonel Sophia Bennett's speech was replayed over and over. She didn't become a meme. She became a movement. And in every video, as she stood in front of the board with her medals shining, one phrase echoed louder than the rest. "Some cracks don't mean failure. They mean light is getting in." The following morning, the fog over Arlington was heavier than usual. It rolled across the headstones like a low, silent tide, cloaking the marble in shades of memory. But inside the administrative building near the North Gate, the mood was anything but serene. Colonel Sophia Bennett stood at the head of a long table, a manila folder in her hand. Her expression was unreadable, but her jaw was tight. Across from her sat Elliot Simmons, checking his smartwatch every 30 seconds. Becca, quiet and pale, sat beside him, fingers knit tightly together in her lap. Brady slouched in the third chair, hoodie up, eyes cast downward, knees bouncing with nervous energy. Behind Sophia stood Ben Stone, posture, like iron arms, folded, watching not with judgment, but with the steady neutrality of a man who'd stood in darker rooms. Sophia placed the folder gently on the table. "I've spoken with the advisory board. As of this morning, Sergeant Stone will not face any disciplinary action." Elliot rolled his eyes. "Of course not. The internet loves a martyr." Sophia ignored him. "But this situation has reached national attention. A lawsuit would prolong the circus, destroy your family's public image further, and do nothing to repair what's been broken." Becca glanced toward Ben, then back to Sophia. "What are you suggesting?" Sophia opened the folder. Inside was a schedule, a form, a signature line. "We have an alternative one the board supports, and I believe serves both justice and education." She turned to Brady. "Young man, you will report here at 0700 Monday morning. For the next 4 weeks, you will participate in a community service initiative under my supervision. You'll clean headstones, catalog, burial records, maintain memorial walkways, and assist with flag placements." Brady blinked. "You want me to work in a graveyard?" "No," Sophia replied. "I want you to serve in a national shrine." Elliot leaned forward, voice cold. "That's not happening. He's a minor. He has rights. We'll file for a settlement and end this in court," Becca cut in. "No." Her voice was so soft at first no one realized it was hers. She looked at Elliot, then at Sophia. "He'll do it." Elliot stared at her, shocked. What Becca sat taller. "He'll go. He'll serve. Because that's the only thing here that makes any sense." Brady opened his mouth to protest, but when he looked at her, really looked, he saw something unfamiliar. Conviction. "Mom." She reached over and took his hand. "It's time we stop pretending consequences are optional." Ben said nothing, but for the first time a slight shift crossed his face, respect barely visible like the first crack of sunlight on a granite wall. Elliot stood. This is ridiculous. We have a life, a schedule. He has a robotics internship in Palo Alto this summer. Sophia raised an eyebrow. He can start a week late, or leave with his last memory, here being a courtroom. Elliot's mouth tightened, but Brady spoke first. I'll do it. All heads turned. Brady stood slowly, hands shaking just enough to be noticed. I don't want this to follow me forever. Maybe I should learn why it matters to so many people. Sophia handed him a pen. He signed. That night, back at home, the Simmons house was quiet. Dinner was a still affair. No phones, no TV, just clinking silverware and a silence that felt necessary. Becca cleared the plates while Elliot retreated to his home office, muttering about investors and optics. Brady sat alone in the dim kitchen. Across from him lay a folded piece of paper. His phone, a sticky note his mom had left earlier. Growth starts at the edge of comfort. He wasn't sure what it meant yet, but he was starting to feel the edges. At the cemetery, Ben sat on the back porch of his quarters, sipping weak coffee from a chipped Marine Corps mug. Across the grass, Emma played by herself, arranging small flags in a row, her silent world painted in careful patterns. Ben watched her for a while, then turned as footsteps approached. Sophia joined him, folding her arms. You okay with this? Ben shrugged. It's not about me. It never is with you, she said softly. He glanced at her. That's the job. Sophia studied him. You don't have to take him personally. He's just a kid. Ben's eyes narrowed toward the horizon. So were some of the boys I buried. Silence stretched between them. Then Sophia placed a hand on his shoulder. This isn't punishment. It's an opportunity for him and for the people watching. You represent something now, Ben, whether you like it or not. I didn't ask for it. No, but you earned it. Monday arrived with the soft buzz of cicadas and the crackling of the flag being raised at dawn. Brady showed up at 6:57. His clothes were too clean, his sneakers too white. He carried a water bottle and a skeptical expression. Ben met him with a clipboard and zero ceremony. You're late. Brady blinked. But 3 minutes early is on time. This is a military site, not a tennis camp. Brady swallowed. Yes, sir. Ben handed him a bucket gloves and a brush. Plot C, row 19. Start with the leftmost headstone and work your way right. Read every name, out loud. You don't skip the dead. Brady looked stunned. Read them, all of them. Ben looked him square in the eyes. They were men, not numbers. Say their names. And then he walked away. Brady stood there confused, sweating already, and something inside him shifted. Not from guilt, not from shame, but from weight. The kind that doesn't break you. It grounds you. As the sun climbed over Arlington, two shadows moved slowly between the rows, one tall and weathered one, young and uncertain. A new kind of silence had begun. But this time, it wasn't empty. It was earning its way back to honor. The third morning began with a blistering sun and a restless wind that scattered flower petals across the walkways like forgotten prayers. Brady Simmons trudged up the hill, sweat already beading under his collar. The novelty of his punishment had long worn off. His arms ached from scrubbing headstones. His throat burned from reading names aloud. He hadn't touched his phone in 72 hours, not because it was taken away, but because he no longer knew what to post. What would he even say? Day 3. Still cleaning graves. Still not famous. No one was waiting for his uploads anymore. The followers had moved on. But something else hadn't. The stillness. The way this place, this hill covered in bones and flags, demanded reverence without asking. Even the birds chirped softer here. That morning, Ben didn't meet him at the gate. Instead, a younger soldier pointed him toward Section F, a row of graves shaded by a weeping willow tree, its long branches brushing the marble like fingertips. He walked in silence, bucket swinging at his side, boots crunching gravel until he saw her. A little girl no older than 8 sat cross-legged in front of one of the smaller headstones. Her hair was pulled into a loose ponytail. A crumpled sketchbook lay on her lap. Her tiny fingers held a fresh lily by the stem. Brady stopped mid-step. She hadn't seen him. Or maybe she had, and simply didn't care. He shifted awkwardly. Hi." No response. She didn't look up, just gently laid the flower at the foot of the stone, then opened her notebook and began to draw. Each stroke of her pencil was slow, deliberate. Brady squinted at the headstone. Unknown infant, 1964, no greater love. He swallowed. The girl turned a page in her sketchbook and began drawing a star, then a flag, then a pair of boots. Brady took a step closer. "You visiting someone?" Still no answer, only her pencil moving, like it was speaking for her. Finally, she looked up, blue eyes calm, unblinking. Brady cleared his throat. "You're not supposed to be here alone." She tilted her head slightly as if amused by the assumption. Then slowly, she reached into her backpack and pulled out a small card. She held it out to him. Brady took it. On it, written in perfect cursive. "My name is Emma. I'm not lost. I'm waiting for my dad." Brady blinked. "You can't talk." Emma gave a tiny shrug and returned to her drawing. Brady crouched beside her, unsure why. He looked at her page again, now filled with stars, flags, and silent silhouettes standing tall. "That's really good," he said. She glanced at him but said nothing. He found himself whispering, unsure why his voice had dropped. "I got in trouble. Threw a soda can. At the wrong place. Wrong guy." Emma didn't flinch, didn't judge. She just handed him her sketchbook. Brady blinked. The first page was a drawing of a man standing straight beside a grave. On the second page, the same man, but holding the hand of a little girl. Below it, 3 words in soft pencil. "He stands for us." Brady's throat tightened. It was him. Ben. With Emma. And now sitting beside her, Brady felt more naked than when the internet had torn him apart. He'd said sorry a dozen times in interviews, but never here. Never to the silence. Never to the people who mattered. He looked back at Emma. "You drew this," she nodded. "And you do this a lot. Come here." She reached into her backpack again and pulled out another flower, a small red carnation, then pointed to a nearby grave. He followed her finger. Melanie Stone. Aid worker. Beloved mother and wife. His stomach dropped. Your mom, Emma's eyes lowered. She gently walked over, placed the flower at the base of the stone, then returned to Brady and sat beside him again. Brady didn't know what to say, so he said nothing. Instead, he opened the bucket beside him, pulled out a brush and bottle, and began scrubbing the nearest headstone, this time without complaint. Emma picked up her sketchbook, and together they sat. One washing names, one drawing them back into memory. Later that afternoon, Ben arrived to pick Emma up. He found them just as the sun dipped behind the willow tree. Brady stood as he approached, nervous again. "She's really something." Ben nodded. "She doesn't talk much," he said. Brady shuffled his feet. "She doesn't have to." Ben raised an eyebrow. That's so Brady looked down at his hands, dirty, blistered, then back at Emma, who was now folding her sketchbook carefully into her bag. "I didn't mean to hurt anyone," he muttered. "I thought it was just some joke. Like, you know, the guard would shout or flinch or make a scene." Ben's voice was quiet, but he didn't. Brady nodded. "No, sir." He didn't. Ben studied him for a long moment, then finally said, "Come back tomorrow. Same time." Brady nodded once. "Yes, sir." As he turned to leave, Emma caught his sleeve. She handed him a folded piece of paper. Brady opened it once he was alone. It was a drawing of two boots, side by side, one tall and polished, the other smaller, slightly untied. And in the space between them, a single flower. Below it, a sentence, written in Emma's now familiar handwriting. Even small feet can walk with honor. That night, Brady lay in bed, the drawing pinned beside his desk lamp. For the first time, he didn't scroll, didn't text. He just stared at that paper and felt something strange, lighter. Like for the first time in years, someone had seen him not as a screw-up, not as a symbol, not as a meme. Just a boy who needed to stand still long enough to feel the weight of where he was and who he might become. By the end of his second week at Arlington, Brady Simmons could no longer feel the tips of his fingers. Scrubbing marble in the summer heat had peeled the softness off his palms. His shoes, once pristine, were now dusted with grass clippings, dried mud, and humility. He didn't complain anymore. He had learned to bring 2 water bottles, one for himself and one for Emma. She never asked, just took it with a nod of gratitude that always felt bigger than a thank you. Each morning, Ben handed him a clipboard with a section number and instructions. No small talk, no coddling, but occasionally a quiet nod that felt like a medal. Today, Brady was assigned to Section K, a broad hillside, lined with older headstones, their etchings fading into time. Rows upon rows of service members from wars he'd only heard about in textbooks, Korea, Vietnam, and one section marked simply, Woo Hee. He got to work reading each name aloud just like Ben had taught him. Private First Class, Anthony Raymond, 1922 to 1944. Sergeant Lillian Carter, 1919 to 1945. Corporal Marvin Ellis, 1920 to 1943. At first, it had felt awkward, like talking to ghosts, but over the days, something shifted. Each name started to feel like a person, not just etched letters, but syllables that once answered roll call. Who wrote letters home? Who bled? Who loved? Who died? By the time he reached the 4th row, the weight of it all began to settle in his chest. He paused to stretch his back, looking over the ridge. Down below, Arlington unfolded like a tapestry of silence and sacrifice. The wind carried the scent of cut grass and old stone. He returned to the clipboard, eyes scanning the next line. Plot 12. Bernard Simmons. Brady blinked. His hand froze. He looked again. Bernard Simmons. Simmons. He read the line twice, then 3 more times. Suddenly unsure of everything. Hands trembling, he set the clipboard down and walked the row until he found it. There it was. Weathered. Clean. Stark. Bernard Simmons, Staff Sergeant, U.S. Army, World War II. European theater beloved husband. Father patriot. 1917. 1944. Brady stared. That was his great-grandfather's name. He'd heard it only once or twice in passing. A black-and-white photo in a hallway. A story at Thanksgiving about someone who fought in the big one. His father never talked about him. Said war was just something the past used to do. Brady had never imagined he was buried here. He knelt, slowly wiping the headstone with his sleeve, brushing away a small leaf that had settled in the groove of the letters. His throat tightened. Without thinking, he whispered, "I'm sorry." It wasn't just for the soda can, or the phone, or even the video. It was for never knowing, for being so close to honor and treating it like a joke. Brady stood up and looked around. The rows stretched endlessly. How many families like his had never brought their kids? How many names lay unread? That afternoon, he returned to Ben's office without a word. He held out the clipboard. "You assigned me to my great-grandfather today." Ben looked up, surprised. "What was his name?" "Bernard Simmons." Ben nodded, slowly recognizing the weight of the moment. "You cleaned it." Brady nodded and read it out loud. Ben stood, walked to a dusty file cabinet in the corner, and pulled out a thin envelope. Inside, he handed Brady a small laminated document, a burial record. "You can keep it," Ben said. It's a copy of his service detail. He's listed in the D-Day secondary landing. Killed near Caen. Medal of Merit awarded posthumously. Brady stared at the document like it was a portal. He wasn't just connected to history, now he was rooted in it. That evening, Brady sat at the kitchen table at home, waiting until his dad finally emerged from his office phone to ear Bluetooth earpiece flashing. "Dad." Elliot glanced over distracted. "What is it?" "Make it quick. I found Grandpa Bernard's grave." Elliot paused mid-step. "What, in Arlington?" Section K. Plot 12. Elliot removed the earpiece slowly. Brady continued, voice soft. "He was in D-Day, Dad. Got a medal. I read every word. Cleaned it myself." Elliot stood still. "I thought you said we didn't have anyone buried there," Brady added. "I never said that," Elliot murmured. "I said there wasn't a point in visiting." "But there is." The silence between them was long, not cold, just full of the years that had gone unspoken. "I think you should come see it," Brady said. Elliot didn't answer. He just looked at his son for the first time in weeks, maybe months, not as a project to fix or a reputation to manage, but as a young man he didn't quite recognize. The next morning, Brady arrived early. Emma was already there, sitting beneath the same tree, sketching quietly. She glanced up as he walked over and patted the space beside her. He sat down. "I found my great-grandpa yesterday," he said softly. "He was a soldier, just like your dad's brother." Emma paused, then began drawing again. A minute later, she tore the page out and handed it to him. It was a new drawing. 2 graves side by side, flowers between them, and above 2 boys, one with a brush, one with a flag, walking away toward the sunrise. Brady smiled. "Thanks." Emma gave him a thumbs up. And for a moment, the weight of the world didn't feel so heavy. That day, as he continued cleaning the next row of stones, Brady no longer looked down in guilt. He looked forward, and every name he read felt like family. The rain came suddenly, as it often did in Arlington, a soft, mournful drizzle that blurred the headstones and turned the grass to velvet. By noon, the grounds were nearly empty. Visitors retreated beneath umbrellas or into the quiet refuge of the chapel. Only a few remained. Brady Simmons sat on the stone bench beneath a maple tree in Section E, his jacket damp hair clinging to his forehead. But he didn't move. He couldn't. In his hands was a small folded envelope, thick cream-colored paper, sealed with a tiny sticker in the shape of a blue star. Emma had handed it to him without a word that morning. She simply slipped it into his palm, looked up at him with those soft, knowing eyes, and walked away. He thought it was a drawing at first, but now seated alone, the envelope felt heavier than paper should. He peeled it open carefully. Inside was a letter, written in blocky, careful handwriting, with smudged pencil and a few misspelled words. At the top, in larger script, "To Mommy." "Read by Brady, please." Brady's hands trembled. He looked around, no one watching. Only rows of silent stone. He took a deep breath and began to read. "Hi, Mommy. It's Emma. I miss you every day. I saw a butterfly this morning and I thought maybe it was you." It landed on Daddy's shoulder, and he didn't notice. But I did. "I'm sorry I don't talk yet. I want to. But it's like my voice is asleep. I try to wake it up, but it stays quiet. That's okay, though, because Daddy always knows what I mean. Daddy still stands at the grave with the other soldiers. He wears his jacket and doesn't cry even when the wind is cold. I think maybe he cries inside. He puts flowers on Uncle Sam's stone every Sunday. He brushes it clean even when it's already clean. I think it's how he tells Uncle Sam I'm still here. There was a boy who was mean to Daddy at first. He threw a can and broke his phone and said bad things. I didn't like him. But now I think maybe he's sad too. His name is Brady. He doesn't say much either. But he started reading the names, and he stopped looking at his phone. And today, he cried. He didn't know what he was standing on. But I think now he does. I hope you're proud of Daddy. I hope you see me drawing. I draw stars for you. And I wait for my voice to wake up. Love, Emma. Brady lowered the letter slowly, the words melting into the rain. His throat burned. His hands curled around the paper like it was something holy. He stared at the horizon, where the rows of graves blurred into mist. The world had always told him to be strong, to win, to dominate. But no one had ever taught him how to grieve, how to sit still with the pain of others, how to understand someone else's silence. Until now. A tear traced down his cheek, slow and uninvited. He didn't wipe it away. Later that afternoon, Ben found him still sitting there, soaked to the bone. Brady stood quickly brushing at his sleeves. I was just about to get back to it. Ben didn't speak. He looked at the folded paper in Brady's hand, then back at his face. You read it? Ben said. Brady nodded, voice rough. I didn't know she could write like that. Ben stared out over the hills. She hasn't spoken since Syria. Brady swallowed. You were deployed. Ben's voice was flat. She was. Her mother. Aid worker. Hospital was bombed. Emma was supposed to be there that day. She got sick and stayed back with me. A beat passed. Ben turned toward him fully. You want to know why I didn't shout that day? Why I didn't throw you out of the cemetery? Brady blinked. Yeah. I would have. Ben's voice lowered. Because I've stood in real chaos. I've heard gunfire, felt the heat of explosions, watched men bleed out while calling for mothers they'll never see again. And in all that noise, the greatest thing I ever learned was how to be still. He paused. You don't punish ignorance with rage. You teach it with presence. Brady couldn't speak. Ben placed a steady hand on his shoulder. Tomorrow, I want you to walk Section D. There's a boy there, Private Glenn Harrison. Died at 19. Same age you'll be in a few years. Brady nodded slowly. I will. Ben started to walk away, then turned back. You read that letter out loud? Brady nodded. She asked me to. Ben gave the faintest of smiles. Not wide, not warm, but real. And for Brady, that was enough. That evening, Brady returned home to a house that no longer felt quite like his. Becca met him at the door. She handed him a towel, ruffled his hair, and said nothing. She'd seen the changes in his eyes. She didn't need confirmation. In his room, Brady pinned the letter above his desk, next to Emma's drawing. He sat on the edge of his bed, the memory of her words echoing through his mind. I draw stars for you, and I wait for my voice to wake up, he whispered into the quiet. I think mine's starting to wake up too. The next morning before heading out, Brady left something in an envelope under Emma's sketchbook, a drawing 2 stars, one large and one small, connected by a pencil line. And below it, just 5 words, carefully written in blocky handwriting. Like hers, I'll read. You draw. Deal. The sky was pale gray with low clouds drifting lazily over the hills of Arlington. It was the kind of day that didn't announce itself. Quiet, overcast, contemplative. Ben Stone stood at his post near the tomb of the unknown soldier body, perfectly still. Rifle balanced with ease against his shoulder. His uniform, as always, was crisp, immaculate, not a thread out of place. To the world watching behind the low rope barrier, he looked unshakable. But inside, he wasn't still. Not today. Because just an hour earlier, as he poured Emma her usual cup of morning cocoa and packed her sketchbook into her bag, she'd slid a sheet of paper across the kitchen table. No words. Just that calm, innocent look of hers, the one that always seemed to know more than she should. He had opened it cautiously. Just one question written in her careful block print. Daddy, did you forgive Brady? Yet he hadn't known how to answer. He still didn't. The wind stirred slightly, brushing the brim of his cap. In the distance, a bugle played the slow notes of taps, for a fallen soldier being buried nearby. The melody was fragile, floating nearly broken by the wind, and somehow it made the question ache even more. Forgive. What did that even mean anymore? He hadn't yelled, hadn't lashed out, hadn't reported the boy or demanded consequences. But silence wasn't forgiveness. Discipline wasn't healing. He thought of that day, the can, the phone, the sneer on Brady's face. But now the sneer was gone, replaced by dirt-stained hands, quiet posture, eyes that had started to learn reverence. And just yesterday, Brady had stood unsupervised, reading the names of fallen soldiers aloud like they were old friends. It had surprised Ben, not just the change, but how much it had mattered. After shift, Ben returned to the quarters and found Emma sitting on the porch, sketching as usual. She looked up as he approached, eyes searching his face. He sat beside her, said nothing for a long while. Then finally, "Why did you ask me that?" Emma didn't answer directly. Instead, she turned her sketchbook around. She had drawn 2 figures, one tall, one short, standing on opposite sides of a stone wall. In the middle of the wall was a single brick, cracked. Beneath it, 3 words: "You can choose." Ben exhaled. She was right, of course. Forgiveness wasn't a feeling. It wasn't something that fell into your lap after enough time passed. It was a choice, a step, like standing guard. Later that night, Ben sat at his small desk, staring at an old photograph. He and his older brother, Samuel, in uniform. Sam had his arm draped over Ben's shoulder, both of them laughing in the midday sun somewhere in Afghanistan. The image was faded, but the bond between them still burned clear. Sam had always been quick to forgive, even when Ben made rookie mistakes, even when things went south. And in their last conversation just weeks before Sam's unit was ambushed, he'd said something Ben could never forget. "You think strength is about holding the line, but sometimes it's about lowering your guard long enough to let someone grow." Ben closed his eyes. He had guarded his pain like a fortress. And Emma, through her silence, her drawings, and now her question had quietly walked through the gate. The next morning, Brady arrived as usual, early, gloves on, bucket in hand. He looked up at Ben with cautious respect. "Section D today," Ben nodded, handing him a new clipboard. "You'll walk with me this time." Brady's eyes widened. Really, Ben began walking without answering. Together, they moved through rows of white marble. Ben would pause every few graves and read a name aloud. Then he'd tell a short story, just a sentence or 2. Private Glenn Harrison, 19. Shot shielding his medic. Lieutenant Sarah Brooks, helicopter pilot. Took enemy fire so her unit could escape. Corporal David Reyes, only son. Volunteered so his younger brother wouldn't have to. Brady listened in silence, each story landing like a pebble in still water. At one point he whispered, "Do you remember all of them?" Ben paused. "I try." They reached a shaded grove where a headstone stood slightly apart from the others. Ben stopped. He nodded toward it. Samuel Stone, Captain U.S., Marines 1981, 2010, brother, warrior, peacemaker. Brady looked at the name, then at Ben. "That's your brother." Ben's voice was steady. "Yes." Brady swallowed. "I'm sorry." Ben nodded. "So am I." He looked out over the fields, not just for what happened, for how long I carried it without letting anyone in. He turned to face the boy. "You hurt a lot of people when you threw that can. You mocked something you didn't understand." Brady nodded. "I know. I wish I could take it back." "You can't," Ben said. "But you're earning forward. That's more important." A pause. Then Ben said the words he hadn't realized he was ready to say until they left his lips. "I forgive you." Brady's eyes welled up instantly, and he turned his head, embarrassed. "Thank you." "Sir." Ben placed a firm hand on his shoulder. "Now go read those names. Someone's waiting for them." Brady walked off slowly, clipboard in hand, back straight, eyes forward. Ben watched him go, then reached into his pocket and pulled out Emma's question folded and creased. He refolded it once more, this time with an answer inside. That evening he left a small note on Emma's pillow. It had only 2 words: I did. The air that morning felt heavier than usual, like the sky itself was holding its breath. Rows of chairs had been arranged in perfect formation on the lower lawn of Arlington National Cemetery, facing a small white canopy and a polished bronze podium. The annual Memorial Youth Service ceremony was a quiet tradition rarely covered by national media, but this year things were different. Because this year, Brady Simmons had been invited to march. It hadn't been offered as a reward. It had been presented as a challenge. Think of it as a final exam Colonel Sophia Bennett had told him: arms, crossed eyes, unblinking. You walk in formation beside real guards. You carry the flag. You match their cadence, their stillness, their respect. And when you reach the grave of your choosing, you salute with meaning. Brady had nodded, too stunned to argue. That was 5 days ago. Now, standing behind the tent, his palms were slick with sweat, and the ceremonial white gloves felt like sandpaper. The flag in his hands, a folded triangle of red, white and blue, was heavier than any weight he'd lifted before. Ben Stone stood nearby, adjusting his own gloves with practiced precision. Though not part of the public ceremony, he had been asked to lead the silent rehearsal walk, a private honor extended only to those with flawless discipline. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. Brady had learned to read his silences. Across the field, a small crowd gathered: veterans, Gold Star families, local students. A few media vans loitered at the edge. Not many, but enough to make Brady's stomach twist. And then he saw them, his parents. Elliot Simmons in a navy suit, sunglasses masking his eyes. And beside him, Becca holding a single white rose, her face softer than he'd seen in years. They hadn't said they were coming. He didn't know how to feel. "Form up," a voice called. The procession began with 5 participants, 3 active duty honor guards, 1 scholarship recipient from a military family, and Brady. Each carried a symbol: a flag, a wreath, or a nameplate of a fallen soldier. Brady had chosen his great-grandfathers, Bernard Simmons, Watu, Omaha Beach. As they began to march step by measured step, Brady focused on his breathing. Left, right, click, turn. Don't drop the flag. Don't mess up the rhythm. Don't look at the cameras. But something unexpected happened as they passed the 3rd row. The wind shifted, and a single paper drawing tumbled across the grass. It caught against his boot. He didn't break stride, but in that half-second glance, he recognized it. Emma's drawing. A star, a boot, a name. She had given it to the event coordinator earlier, asked them to include it, in case someone forgets to smile. Brady's throat tightened. He marched on. They arrived at the platform. Each marcher stepped forward to deliver their token. Brady's hands shook as he placed the laminated nameplate of his great-grandfather on the ceremonial stand. He turned, saluted. For real this time. No arrogance, no irony, just honor. And then, as instructed, he stepped to the microphone. What came next was supposed to be a simple sentence: a name, a war, a thank you. But Brady paused. He took a breath, then another, and spoke. "My name is Brady Simmons. I'm here to honor Staff Sergeant Bernard Simmons, my great-grandfather. He was a soldier, a father, a man I never met. I disrespected this place once, not out of hatred, but ignorance. I didn't understand what it meant to walk on this ground." He looked out at the crowd, then directly at his father. "I do now." A beat of silence, then applause. Not roaring, not loud, but full, honest. Brady stepped back, eyes wet, chest pounding. After the ceremony, people approached quietly, veterans offering nods, an elderly woman clasping his hand and saying, "My son would have liked you." But it was Ben who approached last. He didn't speak, just offered his hand. Brady shook it with both of his. "I meant it," he said. Ben nodded. "I know." A pause. Then Brady asked, "Do you think I could help next year? Not as a punishment, just to help." Ben gave the smallest smile. "Let's see if you keep reading names." Before he could respond, another figure approached. Elliot, still in sunglasses, still tall, still a man used to controlling rooms. But this time he didn't speak first. Brady stood awkwardly. "Hey." Elliot removed his sunglasses. His eyes were red-rimmed. "I saw you march," he said. "You looked like someone else." Brady waited. Then Elliot added voice softer than Brady had ever heard. "You looked like someone I'm proud of." Brady's chest seized. For a moment, neither moved. Then a rare, real hug. It didn't last long. But it didn't have to. It was enough. Later, as the crowd dispersed, Emma ran across the grass, her braids bouncing. She held out a single paper star, cut by hand, uneven edges. Brady took it carefully. On it, written in her familiar blocky letters, "March slow, but never stop." He smiled. Deal. That night, Ben stood on the porch, watching fireflies flicker in the trees. Emma sat beside him, sketchbook on her knees. Was he nervous, she wrote? Ben chuckled, terrified. She smiled, then wrote, "But he marched anyway." Ben nodded. Yes, he did. And that he thought was all any of us could ever really do. It was the first time Ben Stone had ever received a knock on his door after 9 p.m. The world outside was hushed and dark, the silence of Arlington thick with memory. Fireflies drifted lazily beyond the fence. The last bugle of the day had long faded. Ben had been polishing his boots, seated in his usual place by the window, when the knock came. 2 soft raps, not rushed. Measured. He opened the door cautiously. Elliot Simmons stood there still, in the same tailored suit from the ceremony. His tie loosened his expression unreadable. "Evening," Elliot said. Ben didn't answer, only nodded and stepped aside. They sat on the porch, the kind of place where silence spoke first. For nearly a minute, neither man said a word. Then Elliot cleared his throat. "I wasn't planning to come," he said, "to the ceremony." Ben waited. But Becca, she didn't ask. She just said, "You need to see who your son is becoming." He looked down at his hands. "I didn't expect to be proud." Ben let the silence stretch, then said quietly, "You raised him." Elliot scoffed. "No, I managed him. There's a difference." A long pause. "I taught him to win," Elliot continued. "To push harder, think faster, compete smarter. I made sure he had tutors by the age of 5, language apps at 6, mock interviews at 7. He rubbed a hand across his face. But I never taught him how to lose with dignity, how to look someone in the eye and admit he didn't know something." Ben shifted slightly. "Most parents don't." Elliot glanced at him. "You did." Ben looked out into the night. "Only after I failed first." Elliot leaned forward, elbows on knees. "That's why I'm here." Ben raised an eyebrow. "I owe you an apology," Elliot said, voice firm but low. "Not just for Brady. For me. For threatening legal action. For calling you a thug. For seeing you as a symbol instead of a man." Ben studied him for a moment, then gave a slight nod. "It's easier that way," he said. "People see the uniform, the rifle, the silence, and they assume it's all I am." Elliot exhaled. "You could have destroyed him, publicly, legally, but you didn't." Ben turned his gaze back toward the graveyard. "I've been on the receiving end of destruction. It doesn't teach. It just hollows." Another beat of silence passed. Then Elliot asked the question he had never dared until now. What made you take that job? Guarding a tomb. Silent, invisible. Ben was quiet a long time. Then I lost my brother. Afghanistan. Close quarters firefight. I was 10 feet away when he took the hit. Afterward, I couldn't hear anything for weeks. Not from the blast. From inside. He paused. My daughter lost her mother in Syria. Aid worker. Bombing. Elliot swallowed. I didn't know. Ben continued, voice calm but heavy. After that, Emma stopped speaking. I couldn't reach her with words anymore. And honestly, I didn't want to speak either. He looked down at the porch floor, his voice softer now. So I started walking. Guarding. Step after step. In silence. At first it was duty. Then it became prayer. Elliot leaned back, his eyes glistening under the porch light. That boy of yours, Ben said, after a while he's got fire. But he's also got something most people lose by 16, the ability to change. Elliot nodded slowly. He changed because someone like you didn't give up on him. Not when he messed up. Not when the world piled on. You held the line with dignity. Ben didn't reply, but for the first time his features softened, not as a soldier, but as a father. Elliot stood. I'd like to take you and Emma to lunch sometime, he said. No press. No politics. Just people. Ben gave a faint smile. We don't eat fancy. Elliot shrugged. Neither do I. Anymore. He extended a hand. Ben looked at it for a long moment, then stood and shook it. The grip was firm. Equal. No power games. No shields. Just will do men who had learned in very different ways that silence was not weakness. And that sometimes real strength was knowing when to stop talking and simply stand together. The next morning, Ben found Emma already dressed, her backpack on, standing by the door. He raised an eyebrow. You planning to leave without me? She handed him her sketchbook. He opened to the page she'd marked. It was a drawing of two men, one in uniform, one in a suit sitting on a porch, a little girl between them holding a flower. Below it, a sentence. Two fathers. One lesson. Forgive. Then grow. Ben knelt down, kissed her forehead, and whispered, You're the best teacher I know. She smiled. Still no words. But none were needed. Later that day, Ben returned to his post at the tomb. He walked the 21 steps, paused, turned, stepped again. But this time, his gaze flickered toward the horizon, where memory met healing. And far in the distance, standing just outside the rope, were Brady and Elliot, both in silence. Both standing. Together. The cemetery looked different at dusk. The headstones glowed with the golden warmth of a sun too tired to judge. The breeze had softened, and the few visitors remaining walked with slower steps, as if they too were being hushed by the sacred stillness of twilight. Brady Simmons stood alone in Section D, his shoes pressed neatly together, hands holding a folded letter. His final day of service had ended hours earlier, but he hadn't left. He wasn't here for a chore. He was here for a promise. He knelt before a plain white marker, not his great-grandfather's, not anyone related to him at all. Just one that had always pulled at his steps whenever he passed. Unknown U.S. soldier, no rank, no name, no regret. Brady swallowed. This time, no one had asked him to read anything. So he unfolded the letter, the one he'd written the night before, scratched on the back of one of Emma's discarded sketches, because lined paper felt too neat for what he wanted to say. He cleared his throat. I don't know who you were, he began. I don't know what you looked like or where you were from. I don't know if you were scared when you left, or brave, or both. His voice caught for a second. He kept going. But I know you're here, and I know people forget sometimes. Not because they don't care, but because the world gets so loud. He paused. I was one of them. I made it louder. I made it worse. And I'm sorry. The paper shook in his hands. I'm leaving tomorrow. My service hours are done. But I wanted to leave something behind that isn't just apology. It's a promise. He reached into his jacket and pulled out Emma's drawing, the one she'd given him weeks ago, a pair of boots, side by side with a flower in between. He placed it carefully at the base of the headstone. I promise I'll remember you. I'll remember what this place means, and I'll make sure someone else remembers too. The wind shifted light, but steady as if approving. Brady stood, wiped his eyes, and turned. On the hill above, Ben watched in silence, arms crossed over his chest. He'd followed at a distance, not wanting to intrude. But now, standing among the rows, he saw something few ever got to see in real time. Transformation. Not because a boy had been punished, but because he'd been invited to listen, to serve, to carry weight. Ben's chest rose slowly with a deep breath. He felt something settle inside, a kind of peace, a kind of pride. Down below, footsteps approached. Emma, holding a small lantern and a ribbon in her hand, stepped lightly across the grass. She moved beside Brady without a word and knelt beside the grave. He looked at her, surprised. "You okay?" She nodded, unwrapping the ribbon and tying it to a nearby branch. Then she opened her sketchbook and drew a small gold star on the blank page. Brady sat beside her. "You drew one every day, didn't you?" She nodded again. "This place. It's like your voice." Emma hesitated. Then slowly she reached into her bag and pulled out a letter of her own. She handed it to Brady. He opened it carefully. Just one sentence in her soft, blocky print. "I think my voice is waking up now." Brady smiled. Then something unexpected happened. She reached for his hand, and when she looked up at him, eyes filled with quiet light, she opened her mouth and said in the faintest whisper, "Good night, soldier." Brady froze. His breath caught in his throat. She'd spoken. Not a drawing, not a letter, not a whisper written in ink, but a real voice, small, tender, and full of warmth. He looked at her. "You talked." Emma shrugged like it was no big deal, but her eyes shone. Ben had started down the hill, now slow and steady. Brady turned toward the footsteps. "Mr. Stone, she just spoke. She said it." Ben didn't reply. Not right away. He walked to Emma, knelt, and placed both hands gently on her shoulders. "You did?" he asked, voice husky. Emma nodded, then leaned forward, wrapped her arms around him, and whispered in his ear, "Good night, Daddy." Ben held her, not as a guard, not as a Marine, but as a father who had just heard the most beautiful sound in the world. Later that evening, as the sun dipped behind the trees, the three of them sat together on a bench overlooking the cemetery. No one spoke. No one needed to. The stars above were beginning to emerge. Brady glanced up. "Think she'll talk more?" Now, Ben smiled. "Maybe. Or maybe she'll just say what matters." Emma looked up and pointed at the sky. 2 stars, bright side by side. She held up her sketchbook one last time, showing her final drawing of the day. 3 silhouettes, Brady, Ben, and herself, walking away from a headstone with a ribbon fluttering in the wind. Beneath it, 4 words. Not alone anymore. Ever. The summer ended quietly. There were no headlines now. No trending hashtags. No angry think pieces or television segments about what a boy had done wrong or a soldier had done right. What remained was quieter, but deeper and more lasting. Brady Simmons was back at school now, hair a little shorter, posture a little straighter. His old friends didn't quite know what to make of him. He didn't post anymore, didn't chase likes or shout over people to be heard. When they joked about his summer of scrubbing graves, he didn't argue. He just smiled. And every Friday after classes ended, he took the Metro Line 7 out toward Arlington. He came alone. No phone, no entourage, just a clipboard. He walked the grounds, cleaned stones, and read names out loud, not for service hours, but because now it felt like a responsibility. A quiet one, a sacred one. He'd even started a blog, anonymous, unpromoted, simple. It was called Voices from Stone. Each week he posted the name and story of a soldier he had researched, often with Emma's sketches accompanying them. And slowly, something remarkable began to happen. Veterans began to comment. Families messaged in. A widow from Ohio, a grandson from Kansas, a woman whose father had served in Vietnam and had never been remembered in any formal way until now. One message read, "I never thought anyone would say my brother's name again. Thank you, whoever you are." Brady never replied. He didn't need to. Emma, now 9, was speaking in soft spurts. She didn't say much, but when she did, her words always mattered. She had a favorite phrase now. One she whispered every time she saw her father come home, tired from guard duty. "I drew for you today." Ben would kneel, smile, and ask, "What did you draw?" And Emma would open her sketchbook, now overflowing with flags. Flowers, marching boots, folded hands, and stars. So many stars. As autumn arrived, Elliot Simmons made good on his promise. He hosted a private luncheon for veterans and their families, not at some hotel ballroom, but under a white tent set up on the lawn outside Section K, where his own grandfather, Staff Sergeant Bernard Simmons, lay at rest. He didn't invite press. He didn't give a speech. He just stood holding a cup of coffee, walking from family to family, shaking hands and listening. Listening. Later that day, he stood with Ben Stone at the edge of the grounds, both of them watching Brady and Emma walk ahead, her hand clutching the edge of his hoodie, his voice reading something from his notebook. "She talks to him more than she talks to me," Ben said with a soft chuckle. "She trusts him," Elliot replied. "He earned it." They stood in silence for a beat. Then Elliot added, "You saved my son's soul." Ben shook his head. "He saved it himself. I just didn't stand in the way." Elliot looked out at the stones. "Funny how we think we're raising children. Turns out most of the time they're raising us." Ben gave a small nod. Amen to that. That evening, as the sun dipped low, Brady, Emma, and Ben stood before the tomb of the unknown soldier one last time together. Emma placed a single daisy at the foot of the marble. Ben straightened his collar. Brady stood at attention. No words were spoken. Only the wind. Only the memory. Only the silent promise to never forget again. In the weeks that followed, the blog Voices from Stone was discovered by a small-town history teacher in Indiana who used it as a classroom project. Then a librarian in Wisconsin turned it into a memorial reading club. Then a group of veterans from New Mexico began submitting their own names and stories just to be remembered. No one knew it came from the boy who had once thrown a soda can. And that was the point. In the final blog post of the season titled, "The Stone That Spoke Back," Brady wrote, "They say the dead can't speak, but if you listen closely, they do. In the wind between the trees, in the weight of silence, in the kindness of strangers, and in the voice of a little girl who waited 2 years to whisper just one word, good night." He ended the post with 3 names, Ben Stone, Emma Stone. Every soldier who never asked to be thanked, but deserves to be remembered. On a quiet winter night deep into December, Ben tucked Emma into bed after reading her favorite poem about stars. As he rose to leave, she tugged his sleeve. "Can I ask you something?" He smiled. "Always." She looked up at him with sleepy eyes and asked, "Do you think Mommy knows I talk?" Now, Ben knelt, touched her hair gently. "I think she hears every word." Emma nodded content, then whispered, "Then I'll keep talking." For her, outside the snow began to fall. Soft, silent, healing. Just like the journey they had walked together, step by step, name by name toward forgiveness, honor, and family. Not just the kind you're born into, but the kind you earn. The kind you build stone by stone. Before we go, we'd love to know where in the world are you watching from. Let us know in the comments. We read everyone, and it warms our hearts to see how far these stories can reach. If this story touched you or reminded you of something worth remembering, we invite you to subscribe to Soul Moment Stories. There's always a seat here for those who believe in kindness, honor, and the quiet power of love. Thank you truly for spending your time with us today. Until next time, be well, stay kind, and never forget the voices that speak even in silence.